Hey, welcome everybody to our June virtual meetup for SALT Project. We're so excited to be here, and we're especially excited to have our guests, which it's weird to call them guests because they are the essence of SALT Project. That might be a little grandiose to say, but Chunga and Tom are here from the Hacks. Welcome, guys.
Heyo!
Chunga's here from his studio, and Tom's here from his art gallery / his daily office. And we're very excited. So today we are going behind the scenes of the Hacks. The Hacks being one of the most popular tech podcasts, and they just do a lot of fun and awesome things. And it's just gotten so much popularity and feedback that we thought, man, we've got to go behind the scenes and give our SALT Project community kind of an insider scoop of what Chunga and Tom are up to, because it's all kinds of shenanigans. So I want to kick it off with the fact that now for those of you who don't know, if the Hacks is totally new to you, I do actually want to back up here and tell you, so Tom, right, is the person who created SALT itself. So Tom is our creator, our founder, our awesome Tom.
Our deity.
I just love saying these things and watching his face get uncomfortable every time. I don't know when he's going to get used to it, but
He's some sort of computing demigod.
Exactly.
That's what I like to refer to him as, a computing demigod.
I just want to spend more time computing. It's the current sorrow of my life.
And then we have Chunga, who has spent really a lifetime in media and is been a very popular DJ radio host who is a fantastic content marketer. And he does so much behind the scenes with SALT Project from a content marketing side, and then from pushing a lot of our media initiatives forward. So Chunga's been an incredible asset and a big part of SALT Project as well.
Oh, thank you.
So we've got Chunga and Tom, and so they are the co-hosts of The Hacks, which is our podcast that goes over all things tech, and it's just all kinds of fun. And I have sat in on a number of these podcast recordings and guested on a couple, and it's always really funny how for a production, it's not much of a production. It just kind of gets done. They show up, they sit down, they talk about stuff, and then they're done. And I know Chunga does a whole lot of post-production, and we don't see how the sausage is made. And he likes to pretend that it's easy. But I know he puts in a lot of hours. So they make it look really easy. But it doesn't escape me that I think the reason is because they put a lifetime of effort into it, right? Tom, you are the demigod of computing and SALT. And then Chunga, you have a lifetime of media experience. Is that why it's so easy?
Well, I think you know what? I think you're onto something. I think I certainly can't speak for Tom, but I think there's a couple of things that make the Hacks popular. By the way, it just was given is it an award? I don't know what you'd call it, but Whelp magazine in the UK just named it a top 20 tech podcast. That's a global thing, so they're based out of the UK, and that was a tremendous honor. So thank you to Whelp magazine. I think the reason that it works is because neither one of us are trying to be something that we're not. I think that's what makes the Hacks work. I don't try to profess, we've got some brilliant minds behind SALT. I'm not one of them. I'm really not. I don't have anything to do with the coding. I don't have anything to do with that, but I am a fan of SALT, and I'm a fan of the SALT community. And I think one of the reasons that it works is because I don't try to have any sort of a pose that I'm something that I'm not. And on the other side of things, I think Tom is very much the same way. Tom doesn't try to be anything other than what Tom is. And I think the combination of the two tends to work. And then on top of that, I think Tom and I have a really good friendship and a really good chemistry away from the Hacks that makes it work as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of it does have to do with the fact that for us, the Hacks is mostly just spilling the crap that's already been rattling around in our heads for the last, more years for Chunga than for me, but many years. And being able to get two people who are able to work together on something like this in a nice, smooth way really makes it surprisingly easy to pull off. At least from a production perspective.
Yeah, there's not a lot of editing. We typically will sit down and usually morning of or night before, and we'll discuss 5 or 6 different topics, and we'll settle on the 2 or 3 that we feel that is going to be the most interesting, not only to the salt community, but to, well, I mean, that's a big factor, but to be honest with you, the biggest factor is what's going to be interesting to people that aren't in the salt community. What's going to bring people in and get them to take an interest or invest in Tom or myself, and then serve as the gateway to the salt community, to where they come in and they go, well, I like these guys. I like the cut of their jib. And
That's
the
right.
next thing you know, they're signing up to be salt community members. I mean, that's the whole goal. So when we start talking about topics, oftentimes it's really not the salt community. That comes second. What comes first is how can we endear ourselves to those who we feel may be interested in salt? And those are typically pretty mass appeal topics that you could do almost anywhere on talk radio or on, a YouTube channel or whatever. We definitely have the mandate. The cornerstone of the hacks is it's entertainment first, and then it's tech-based topics second, and that's been from day one.
I
Yeah,
think you definitely achieved that.
yeah, it makes it a lot easier, because otherwise it would just be me prattling on about nonsense for 45 minutes. I guess that's kind of how it ends up half the time anyway, though.
Yeah, but I love it that way. The thing that surprised me is that we were actually able to sell it. Before when we were Salt Stack, I was surprised that we were able to go to Mark and Alex and a lot of guys calling the shots. I was actually able to go to Tom and say, look, I think we should do a podcast, and I think it should be an entertainment-based podcast. And oh, by the way, it has tech stuff in it. Because I think what's going to happen is people will invest in us first, and then they'll choose to invest in the product. If we just start rattling off a bunch of extremely dry product-based masters and minions tech stuff without that entertainment factor in there, I think they're going to be around for about 2 seconds. And the shows continue to grow from day one, I think, because of that.
Absolutely. It's a award-winning, global, growing podcast that has all kinds of success. And I have people message me regularly going, oh man, I was crying laughing about the hacks the other day. Oh, this part was so funny, and whatever else. So that's pretty funny. And so I remember sitting on Chunga's couch, listening to Chunga and Tom talk about the upcoming episodes and trying to decide what they were going to talk about. Because I was just there to guest on an episode about SaltConf. But they were going to do a whole other couple of episodes as well. And they're talking about what they're going to do. And I thought it was really interesting how Tom thinks, because Chunga made a few suggestions and then Tom kind of went, I want to think about that one a while longer. And they decided to record it the next week. And Tom probably just was driving around, just like, think about it. And that was like your version of kind of preparation, because there's already so much brilliance there, so much experience there. You're like, I want to kind of noodle that around, as one of our product marketers would say. And then he came back a week later and was like, okay, let's talk about this. And I like the way Tom thinks. I like watching the magic happen.
Oh, it is very true. In fact, I think my job, it's funny because my job is definitely not to talk about the tech. I very much view my job as the first thing I need to do is get Tom talking, and then I need to control it. That's really it. Turn on the faucet and then make sure it doesn't run all over the floor, sort of
right.
thing. And just let Tom just do his thing.
That's helpful because I mean, you've got to say something deprecating towards me, because this is just downright embarrassing. Oh, Tom's genius. No. I mean, there's a fair amount of preparation. There's a fair amount of research that goes into the topics that we go over, and very often I've spent quite a bit of time reading over what we're talking about. So it's not just me constantly pulling magic out of thin air.
We sure like people to think that, though. In fact, I believe you had a conversation with Dirk at VMware, where what was it? Dirk at VMware, was he the guy that came to you and said, I don't know how you guys do this so fast, because this would take me, each episode would take me months to put together. Was it Dirk that was saying that to you?
Yeah. He was just saying that it's hard to come up with topics. And that when he does that, when they come up with topics, it just takes a little longer to put everything together.
Mhm.
And I think that the reality there too is that we are able to put things together pretty quick, which has been positive. At the same time, we riff on adjacencies quite a lot, which makes things smoother, makes things easier. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel every time. I mean, it is kind of like we get up and we're making the same kind of show every time, and that does make things a lot smoother.
Yeah, we have our cadence, right? We have our routine, how we do
Yeah, there is a formula, which is basically come up with something tech related to talk about and throw in a lot of movie quotes, and we're going to be fine.
it.
So
Actually, the show kind of, there is a little bit of a secret. Some of you, if you're not seeing this live, put it on pause, and if you're watching this through YouTube, and search a YouTube channel called Andertons. There's a music-based podcast about a little store in England called Anderton's Music Company, and the owner of this store, this guy named Lee Anderton, decided he was going to start doing a QVC type podcast or QVC type YouTube channel where he was showcasing different guitars. And he would say, "Look, is this guitar? Isn't this great?" But it turned out to be something completely different, and that is really where the hacks got its inspiration. Were these two guys sitting in a studio talking about guitars, but really, it's this much entertainment and it's this much guitars. And that was really, I think if you were to go watch an episode of Andertons, you would see the comparison between the two. And I didn't know if what Tom's temperature was going to be on that when I sold it to him, and Tom took right to it. I mean, he got it immediately what we were trying to do from taking a look at the Andertons episodes.
yeah, that's a ton of fun. So when you're doing these episodes that are very entertainment based, but there's a lot of information in them as well. Chunga, you're not a heavy tech guy, right? You are more the entertainment, and then Tom is a lot more the heavy tech. So what kind of is your internal dialogue sometimes when you're having these conversations with Tom? Like, do you ever just go, what? Or what's he saying? Or like, what kind of things are you thinking? Are you more trying to anticipate him, or talk to me about your internal
Oh, well,
dialogue during the
yeah,
show?
actually, that's actually a great question because again, it goes back to what we were talking about. I don't try to be something that I'm not. I've been in the tech space for a couple of years. I came from the entertainment industry, and I don't pretend to know anything really about it. But what I do, and one of the reasons that I think the hacks has grown in popularity, is that I put myself in the mind of the audience, the listener, the viewer that doesn't know this, that is this the student, or maybe the CISO, or the CISO. We've never really been able to get a definitive answer on what that is, the CISO or the CISO or the
About
CIO.
CISO.
Yeah, sure. We'll call it the CISO, but putting yourself in the mindset of someone like that, they're not going to know everything. In fact, in many cases, they're going to know a fraction of what Tom knows. So in my mind, I just take on that role. No question is too dumb. No question is too stupid. Just ask the questions. And Tom is very, very graceful at fielding those questions, no matter how stupid they are. I think really it's really Tom's patience more than my questions that make all that work. But the internal dialogue is very much like, okay, what would someone need to know here? What would someone who's new to Salt need to know? What would someone who knows nothing about infrastructure intrusion, what would they need to know? And then it's really organic. I just simply ask those questions because I don't have that pose, right? There's nothing telling me, okay, look, you have to pretend like you know more than you actually do.
Right, which you actually have a solid grasp of the industry, Chunga. Don't disparage yourself too deeply on there. You've been in the tech space for a bit, and you have a solid grasp. Right. Tom, go ahead.
Right.
Yeah, one of the areas of real brilliance is being able to ask questions. Being able to formulate questions and bring them together is something which a lot of people really struggle at doing. And Chunga's ability to continuously deliver good questions is something that's really quite staggering. And And it's good that he continues to deliver good questions, because occasionally he'll give me a question, I'll raise an eyebrow, because my reaction is, oh no, he has no idea what's going on right now. I must just be out in left field. He doesn't know what I'm saying at all. Therefore, no one knows what I'm saying. But
That's
yeah,
never
no,
happened to me.
the formulation of a good question is very critical. And it's also something that not all questions deserve answers, so to speak. Oftentimes, the best questions that I've received are the ones that I feel lead to really good answers. And that's something that Einstein used to say a lot, which was that if you had an hour to solve a problem, you should spend the first 58 minutes formulating the question. Because in all reality, once you understand the question in a nice cohesive way, then the answer becomes very clear. It's very Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. When they go to deep thought and say, what's the answer to life, the universe, and everything, and deep thought says 42, but you've got to come up with a freaking question. That question's crap. And so Chunga's ability to be inquisitive is one of those driving factors. I'm just an answer box full of crap.
So Tom, talk to us about your internal dialogue during the show.
My internal dialogue is just kind of vomit. It just goes right out. You hear
It becomes external.
I just
Your internal
externalize my internal dialogue.
Perfect. So
I start monologuing.
I'm gonna interrupt the patting on the back fest and ask you about a time that you just really screwed up, and Chunga had to do a whole lot of editing in the episode. Maybe it was Tom, maybe it was Chunga. Tell us about a hack screw up.
Oh, that's every episode. That's every time. Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh, that's there are times where Tom kind of talked about it, that there are times where I'll ask a question and Tom will respond, and he'll see it on my face like I'm not grasping this at all, and he does use me as a barometer, to the point where if I'm not getting it, then we have to assume that the audience is not getting it, because we don't want to get too granular. We don't want to get too inside baseball on what we're doing. This is, and to use a marketing term, it's this is a very top of funnel operation, where we're casting a very wide net and we're just trying to raise awareness for salt here. We're not getting into salt states. We're not getting too deep into the masters and minions. And if we do, Tom will typically grab that. Tom will typically notice that and we'll stop and we'll backtrack a little bit and we'll cut that section out and we'll dumb it down a little bit.
It's funny to me that you specifically say you don't get granular on the hacks, because we specifically say on Salt Air, our video series, that is a place where we get granular on salt. So that's where we bring
it's apples and oranges, right? It's two totally different things. But there's also, for the longest time I had a cat that had dementia and was senile, and during the pandemic, Tom would come and record in the studio in my house before I moved to Las Vegas. And so we had my cat Herbie that was constantly howling at Tom. You would never hear the cat ever until Tom came over, and then he just would not shut up. So we were constantly having to stop recording to deal with my cat that was freaking out that Tom was there. So yeah, we have a lot of things that go sideways, but it's never really based on content. It's usually based on external stuff. Like, Tom will regularly fart in the middle of a show, and fart loudly. He'll regularly do that he'll eat a big thing of JCW's cheese fries and then just dig in and let them fly in the middle of the recording. So I do have a blooper reel, and one of these times I'm going to put that out into the wild of Tom and I burping and farting through different episodes.
Are you being serious that you pick up the times where I pull away from the mic?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then
so I've got to pull away farther, is what you're saying.
And then I'll take those out, and I've got them stored in the vault with my Zapruder film.
What I'm hearing is I need to be present at more of these recordings to prevent some of all this.
Oh yeah.
I was unaware that it was that bad.
Oh, it's not that bad, but it is fun. I can't really think of a time, Tom. Maybe you can. I can't really think of a time where we have gotten something horribly wrong with regard to the topic that we're talking about. Because the research is always there. We're usually pretty familiar with the subject matter by the time we record the show.
Yeah, I think it's usually on the only two I can think of far as your screw ups is one time I was there and I'm working on admin stuff and Tom talked to me during the episode as though I could respond and Chunga had to go, she's not mic'd, like you can't talk to
Oh
her.
yeah, I do. I do remember that. Yeah, there's always text.
So I kind of
stuff like
yelled my answer.
Yeah.
Whatever. And then
Yep.
the other time was oh man, what was it? I totally blanked. Maybe I'm not supposed to share it.
Well,
But Tom, can you think of screw ups?
Yeah, I can think of a screw up of mine. So recently we had to set up a studio in my basement for recording because Chunga, it wasn't hot enough here in Utah, and so Chunga decided to retreat to Las Vegas, and so I've got a theater room in my basement, so the acoustics down there are fantastic. And so we set up a recording studio down there, and I've got my noise canceling headphones, and I put my headphones on, and we start recording. And Chunga's voice was coming through the headphones, and we recorded a couple of episodes. The whole time, Chunga's voice was also coming out of my laptop speakers, polluting the audio.
And Tom had his headphones on, so he couldn't tell. So it was feeding back into the recording, and he didn't know it. Yeah, we lost 2
Sony
episodes.
noise canceling headphones are phenomenal.
It does suck when you take, for every one of these 30-minute episodes, it's, per episode, it's about an hour to an hour and a half of us putting the episode together in the actual production of it. And so 2 episodes, that's about 3 hours that we lost of time there doing that. And unfortunately, those were good episodes. One of them I was able to save. You can go back, it's I can't remember which one it is, but you can tell there's a bunch of really, really abrupt edits all through the episode. But the second episode, it was called Tom's State of the Union, was the name of the episode. I couldn't save that one.
Oh,
well, the nice thing about that is that it was a crappy episode anyway.
It really was. Tom was really punchy because he was about to get married, and I just spent most of the episode giggling at the dumb stuff Tom was saying. It was more like an episode of Ernie and Bert on Sesame Street than anything, I think.
Yeah, I was a little distracted.
It happens to the best of us. And actually, I remembered the one I was going to share. I was there when you guys were recording the Thanksgiving episode. It was the episode that was going to air right after Thanksgiving. And so Chunga was like, Tom, how was your Thanksgiving? And Tom goes, Thanksgiving is this week. And Chunga's like, dude, be cool. We're airing this after Thanksgiving. And Tom just could not
I forgot about that. And it actually took a couple of tries.
Yeah, it did.
That was hilarious. That's right.
I think you at one point you were like, maybe we should just air the episode with Tom going, what? Like it hasn't happened.
I think that would have been pretty good, honestly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was pretty. That is just how genuine Tom is. He was like, we talk about So no, that was pretty good. Okay, so what would you say is your favorite and least favorite part of doing the hacks, each of you?
Oh wow, Tom, you go first. I want your response first.
And start with least favorite.
I'll start with least favorite.
Yes. Because then it just only goes up. You got to end on that.
I think that my least favorite part of doing the hacks is finding the time. My calendar is ridiculous.
Yes.
Because I've got my hands in too many things right now. I'm just too distracted overall, and it's hard to get that good solid 3-hour block that we need, and also because we need enough time to get into the right mental space. You can't go from one thing to another rapidly. In these sorts of situations. And I've never been too terribly good at the whole multitasking thing. Anything I start to melt mentally. So really where I think that my least favorite thing is finding the time and really carving that out. Because everything else I just love. I mean, I just think it's an incredible blast to just sit there and shoot the bull with Chunga and have fun doing it.
And pick your most favorite of those things.
My most favorite? I copped out, right? I'm like, oh, look.
Yeah, you did. It's lovely. The whole thing is lovely. You gotta pick one.
Um, I think my most favorite is when Chunga asks me things that I don't have answers for. Because typically that means that the answer I have to give is going to have to be more philosophy driven. It's going to have to be more, well, if we put these pieces together in this way, then we can make these sorts of assertions. But I'd much rather explore what I don't know than explore what I do know, because that really allows for diving into knowing where I need to study, knowing where the gaps are. Like I was saying earlier, it's all about finding fantastic questions. I was in a seminar recently. I was invited to a national security seminar at the Army War College, which was really cool. And one of the lecturers that they had there was a guy who'd written a book called A More Beautiful Question. And so this has been very on my mind this last week or so, because it was, to my surprise, the seminar that I felt like I got the most out of, because so much of it was about formulating the right question, right? What is it that's missing? And so I think I find the gaps and the areas where we have less knowledge the most interesting and the most fun.
Nice. Chunga,
So
least
so for
favorite.
yeah, least favorite is look. It's I wish I had something more colorful. It's exactly what Tom said. It's really really tough, especially since being acquired by VMware. It's really difficult to find the time in the schedules to give it what's, it's a new medium for a lot of people. For a lot of more tech savvy people, it's not quite as new. But selling this idea, we had to sell it to SaltStack, and then we had to sell it to VMware to have them continue the hacks, which was a thing that I was very nervous about, that Tom and I had put all of this work into it, and the VMware was going to say, yeah, I don't know that this is going to be something that we're going to choose to continue. So you go through all of that, and then you have this dedication to it and this commitment to it, and then when you actually record the episodes, you're so crunched for time. A lot of times, this past episode that we did, which is building better corporate open source muscle, is what I think the most current episode is as of this recording for this virtual meetup. Tom and I think we did that one so fast. I think we actually had 45 minutes, and we used up 42 of those minutes to do the episode. So we ran into the studio. There was almost no prep for it, and then we just we had to wing it on the fly. And while that's my least favorite part, my most favorite part is when you're in a condition like that, or you're in that kind of a stress to try and get that content put together, and then you have something that's really cool. And that episode turned out really good, I think. I think Tom was in rare form. I think there was maybe a frantic energy that we were both able to channel to get that episode to sound and feel the way we wanted it to sound. And that's one of my most favorite things. And I know it's going to sound like I'm pandering, because we have Gareth and we have, some of our other buddies that are on this, this virtual meetup. But it really means a lot to me when guys that really know the space will hit me up and say, "Oh, Chunga, by the way, here's some more information about this," or Tom was wrong here, or Chunga, you are wrong here, let me help you. And we get that engagement and we get that feedback. That's what makes me the most happy, because that tells me that people are paying attention, and they're actually actively listening to what we're trying to say, and they're getting it. They're getting the point that we're trying to get across. And it really means a lot when you see someone in Germany, you know, hit you up on Twitter and they're posting on their company channels or whatever saying, hey, these guys are legit. These guys, you need to listen to every single episode. And it's some CIO in Germany somewhere putting that out to his staff through Twitter. That's a huge compliment, you know, to know that that work that we did in Lehigh and Vegas is making it all the way around the world to people within our space. And yeah, I don't want to say, I mean, it sounds really kind of like destructive to the credibility, but it's like they're buying it, you know, they're actually buying it. But that's kind of the way it feels, you know, because we do put a lot of work into these things, and there's a lot of love and a lot of just a
Yeah.
lot of care that goes into it, you know. But throughout all of that, it's going to sound so cheesy, and forgive me, my favorite thing about the hacks is when we're not doing the hacks, and that's just talking to Tom and just finding out what's going on in his world, and just getting that chemistry, and just having your buddy there to talk to, you know what I mean? And that generates a certain level of chemistry that you can't force. That's, you know, people aren't stupid. If you try to force that kind of chemistry, people read it immediately and the show doesn't work. So my favorite thing about the hacks is actually before we record the hacks.
Yeah, no, I love it. You guys definitely don't fake the friendship, and I love that. And I think more so than, hey, they're buying it, it's more, hey, they get it, you know, because you're putting
Right,
out
yeah, exactly.
really solid stuff, and it's so nice to have that resonate with people and have it click, and you're like, okay, we're not just on this island, you know, people really understand what we're talking about, and it's exciting, and that connection feels good.
It is, and the audience grows every single episode. You know, every month we grow. Every single month we grow. I got coronavirus and we missed some episodes. And even though I had coronavirus and couldn't talk, we didn't have the ratings that particular month that we normally do. But if we would have only put out 2 episodes a couple of months earlier like that, it would have tanked. You know what I mean? So the audience continues to grow, and they continue to consume the podcasts that are out there, and it gets bigger every single month. And that's, oh man, that's really exciting to me. Really exciting to me.
Well, and talk to us about, go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, we have a question.
We will get to that.
Well, we do. We have questions in the chat.
Yes, and yeah, we can jump into that in a second. We're queuing them up for the end. So
Nice. Fine, I'll wait.
thank you, Tom. No, it's a lot of fun, and you guys do a lot of cool stuff. So talk to me a little bit, probably more of a Chunga question. Why a podcast? We're relaunching our Salt Project blog. We have a lot of cool blog content coming out. We're very excited about that blog, but we still think it's important to have a podcast. We think it's important to have our video series. We have a lot of different things, but why in particular do you think the podcast is just doing awesome?
Well, believe it or not, I mean, it's a great question. Podcasts within an industry space, they've actually been given a term now. They're called brand podcasts or branded podcasts, and it's becoming a thing within the podcast and broadcast community. More and more companies are embracing this, but when we started doing this, it was definitely a concept that was ahead of its time, and still is. A lot of corporate entities and a lot of especially tech companies are just coming around to this now, because they're finding out that well, let me put it this way: newspapers are going bankrupt. They're going under, and the reason they're going under is not because their content is printed on paper. That's not why they're going. They're going under because people are just, the world has changed, and people consume information much differently than they used to do that. And media, if you look at it, perforates the lives of every single human being on the planet with smartphones and you know, digital technology, streaming technology in your cars, and I mean, it's just everywhere, right? And so while blogs definitely have their place and they're definitely valuable, people just don't retain the information. They don't stick with it. Study after study has shown that people will start a blog and for the most part won't finish it. And the frequency to which people finish and make it all the way through a podcast is light years ahead of where blog posts are. Not only that, there's been numerous studies over the past decade that show that if someone consumes information, like a prospect consumes information via video or podcast, they're 80% more likely to close. So while a lot of people, especially people that forgive me, are of a certain age and are maybe at an executive level, they still may not understand it. They're slowly starting to come around to, well, geez, people are much more invested in our product. They're much more invested in what we're doing, because by the time they've gotten to that point, they've invested in the person that's the host. They've invested in the information. They've invested in the podcast as a whole. So they're getting further and further and further into the marketing and sales funnel. And before you know it, they're completely invested in everything that you're saying, and you're not really selling them. At least in their mind, they're not being sold anything. When in reality, they're very much being sold something.
Well, and the nature of Salt Project, right, is that we're creating a community. We're not creating clients. We're creating community and connecting them with these ideas and with these concepts. And the podcast is super effective in doing that. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, this is a fundamental shift in how business needs to operate. And this is something that we've seen in a lot of the shifts around how business has changed, mostly in the last 10 to 15 years. The advent of open source, I think, is less a phenomenon and more a manifestation of just how the economics of certain capabilities have rolled out. Since we have economics that are built in such a way that we can produce things that are more cheaply consumable, that changes the nature in which things are consumed. And as we move forward, we have to constantly rethink how delivery happens, and how that delivery translates into into economic gain, not just into the proliferation of ideas. Because it's one thing to proliferate ideas, but if the proliferation of those ideas do not put food in your mouth, you don't get to proliferate ideas anymore. And so that balance is something that I think that we're beginning to see more and more permeate more and more companies. And this is where podcasting comes in. It used to be that if somebody wanted a product, for instance, they would effectively be forced to sit down and read. Whereas now we have more mediums that can draw people in. And the way that you draw people in has to be more genuine now. It can't just be marketing dribble. It has to be real communication about what matters to people. And it has to be interesting, and it has to be entertaining. Because people, we seem to have a lot more time for entertainment than we do for study. And I think that's true for anybody, regardless of their age. And also, though, information which is conveyed in an entertaining way is significantly easier to retain. And it's also easier to retain because you build an emotional attachment to that information, because the story becomes cohesive in your mind. Which is one of the things that I think is also important if we pull away from just how we send information into the wild in general, is making sure that combination and the ability to convey information in an entertaining, emotional way that is also accurate is something which is extremely rare, and something that we try really hard to do. As opposed to, shooting dribble out there just to get following. You don't want that. You want truth and reality. And the reality also is that you can't make up stuff as good as what people do in the wild.
That's very true.
That is very true. And speaking of people who are the whole reason that we're here and we connect, we've got some of our favorite people in the community here. We've got like Gareth and David from the Salts project team. Who else? We have Gary and Randy, who are two of our favorite community members. And if any of you guys would like to ask a question, feel free to pop on video or just go off mute and ask your question. Gary, I think you had one, and I'm happy to ask it for you.
Yeah, just hop off mute if you guys want. I would prefer it that way. I think it makes for better conversation.
Thanks. Yeah, so my question was, and I know there was a lot of, especially when the acquisition was announced, there was a lot of consternation in the community around what was going to happen with salt and the community. So my question, and to kind of frame that a little bit further, I've been very pleasantly, extremely pleasantly surprised with how supportive VMware's been. But my question is, was it hard to sell the idea of continuing the podcast once the acquisition took place? And how does it kind of fit in with what VMware is already doing? Does VMware already do? I think they do maybe do some YouTube channels and stuff, but does it kind of fit in with kind of their general media strategy? Or is it, or like what Salt does, is it kind of completely different than the rest of VMware?
I want to kick this off by saying what I've said several times in different community meetings around the SALT project is that VMware is extremely supportive of what we're doing. They very much want SALT project to grow, to succeed, for the community to do its thing, to maintain autonomy. We don't need to be afraid of corporate VMware at all. And I know Gary had just attested to that fact that he's really seen that as the SALT projects continue to grow. As far as the podcast specifically, I'll let Chunga and Tom answer that.
I think that Chung and I are going to have very different answers to how hard was it to sell the podcast, because for me, I was pushing the hacks during the acquisition process, so pre-close.
Yeah.
And I was making sure that my questions were, so we're still going to do these things and the hacks is in place, right? The hacks is in place. We're not going to lose the hacks. And I was always just reassured. Oh yes, heavens, the hacks we love the hacks. You have to do the hacks. But at the same time, pre-acquisition, I'm talking to managers at a certain level. Post-acquisition, I think Chunga had to wade through some less friendly waters, and there were a few times where we had to dial up a more senior executive to say, hey, can you very kindly explain to this person that they don't know what they're talking about and that we're still doing the hacks?
That's you know what, the way Tom described it was exactly that. It was funny because Alex Pay, who many of us know,
Love Alex.
Yeah, shout out to Alex, great friend, great guy. He came to me pre-acquisition. I was not supposed to know about the acquisition, even though I did. And he came to me and he said, hey, I need a slide about the hacks for our board. And I'm like, oh, the board. Yes, I knew exactly what he wanted the slide for. And that was for the entire pitch for the acquisition. And I asked him, I put one slide together that had the numbers for the hacks and how much the hacks has grown and what kind of engagement is like and how people are interacting with the hacks, and put it all in one slide for him. And then I went back to him a couple of weeks later and said, how did the slide work? He goes, the slide was actually clutch. It was a central part of our pitch, and it was a core value in what we were trying to get across. And I think that was largely because Tom was just banging that drum so loud. Yeah, post acquisition, it was people at a bit lower level, lower than Tom, lower than Alex, but certainly higher up in stature than Janae and myself. We're like, what is this? Why is this taking so much time? Why aren't you writing blogs like you're supposed to be writing blogs? And again, that goes back to what I was talking about, how, look, the power of a podcast episode or a podcast in general, like the hacks, is, it's hard to even chart the power of something like this over a blog post. So it took me kind of going and doing some very tactful, very graceful pushback in the early days of the acquisition to say, no, this is what we're doing. This is why we're continuing to do this. This is why it's so important. But the nice thing is that we had people, shout out to Purnima, she was very much and Ajay at the time was very much a torchbearer and a champion of the hacks. Like they loved it. They thought it was a great idea. And Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, as I understood it, the hacks was a factor in the acquisition. So at least that's what I was led to believe.
Yeah, it was a factor. The acquisition would have happened without the hacks, don't get me wrong.
Right, sure.
But it was certainly very helpful. But one of the things that's really interesting, and I appreciate, Gary, what you said, that you've been very pleasantly surprised. One of the things that's interesting is where some of VMware's motivations are, because much of what Salt does is very different from VMware. And I'm repeatedly reminded because, so for me, I'm in a corporate environment now, and this is an incredibly foreign thing to me. I'm very accustomed to hiding out somewhere and writing code and then just saying, hey, I wrote code and it does these things. Or saying, here's a high level vision, here's the direction we want to go, or here's a prototype. And then I just kind of hand it to the right people and they run with it. Inside of a corporation, it's very, very, very different. I don't get to function in the same CTO kind of role. And a lot of the motivation for VMware acquiring SaltStack was really around trying to bring in more of the open source culture and understanding. And it's been really interesting to watch that unfold. And for me, I've had to figure out how it is that I have to, and am figuring out how I even communicate inside of a corporation like this. And every now and then I think I've got it, and then I realize that there's much, much more to learn. And so the great thing about the differences inside of Salt and VMware is that more and more people inside of VMware are beginning to see and understand the importance of looking at a broader ecosystem when it comes to targeting the buyer. When we look at things, and so my head's been very in product lately. And when you're in product, you're very focused, for instance, on finding a specific persona that you want to target. And you do that in product, you do that in marketing. But when we step back and we look at a broader ecosystem play, it's really important to remember that it's about working inside of an ecosystem to create gravity towards the aspects of your business that drive monetization. And that gravity is driven through loyalty and through trust. And those things can't be faked. They can't be faked the way that one might fake the sale of a candy bar. It's got to be very legitimate, especially when you're talking about controlling and managing large amounts of infrastructure. And this is the beginning of where we are. I shouldn't say beginning of. We are part of an ongoing cultural shift inside of VMware to drive that mindset more. And the irony is that that mindset's central to where VMware came from. VMware in its early days was seen as the primary authority on virtualization. But VMware now, like with many companies, has grown into many, many, many products. And there's lots of virtualization options out there. And virtualization isn't seen as the primary pillar of the infrastructure that it necessarily used to be. And so that shift is something that is a normal evolution of a company of this really of this size and this trajectory. And so that's something that's been really exciting to be part of. But also a lot of companies get swallowed up by a bigger company, and they get washed. So for instance, when IBM buys a company, they call it blue washing, where they purposefully come in and impose themselves kind of on that acquired company. And the interesting thing about, again, VMware and the Open and Salt project has been that they're very, very interested in how we do things, and how we can permeate their culture in a deeper way.
Yeah, and can I jump in on that, Tom?
Yeah, sorry,
Actually,
I went crazy.
No, I was about to say,
No.
You got me monologuing.
Gary's well on his way to being a Hacks co-host. He asked a great question and turned the faucet on for Tom. Great job, Gary.
Well, yeah, that's how it's done, Gary. But there's something that you brought up though, which is Yeah, VMware does have other podcasts, and yes, VMware does do other media. But the thing is that you know, when we were first acquired, I would begrudgingly be allowed to do the hacks, and now the hacks has become the model by which a lot of these other business units within VMware, they're now looking to the hacks and saying, okay, how do we emulate this, or how do we do this? And so I was actually brought in as a writer at VMware. I don't write anymore. In fact, I write more for the Salt Project strategy team than I do on the vRealize automation side of things and the VMware side of things. Really, all I do now, my entire job is basically taking what we do on the hacks and building other podcasts and other programs and other videos and other media that give a similar kind of vibe to different products, whether it's vRealize Cloud or vRealize Cloud Universal, or whether it's vRealize Automation. So there's a lot of other products that we're now starting to that are now starting to adapt what Janae and Tom and I did at SaltStack with the hacks. And so the hacks is becoming a bit of a Pied Piper, for lack of a better term, within VMware, and other business units and other teams are now starting to follow suit, which I think is fantastic.
Absolutely. No, and I love it. The hacks has been fantastic, and it's been really fun watching it grow. I've really appreciated having the hacks themselves, Chunga and Tom here, and honestly, just two of my very dear friends. So it's been a lot of fun being able to do this with you guys. Appreciate everybody being here, especially Tom and Chunga taking the time when I know you're already so slammed. So thanks for what you do. Thanks for keeping the community cohesive and connected through the podcast. We really love it. Appreciate you being here. Thanks everyone, and we will catch you next time. Remember that our virtual meetups are every month on Wednesday, the third Wednesday of the month at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. So thanks for being here. And quick plug for a meetup we are actually doing later today. So 9 p.m. Mountain Time, which is 11 a.m. Singapore time on the 17th. And we will be doing another virtual meetup on config management for the APJ region. And we're very excited about it. So feel free to join us later on, and we'll catch you there. Thanks everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the hacks.
Thanks.